Well, welcome everybody to another episode of Level Up Law. We are live, and today we are going to be talking about background screening reports. When you apply for a rental unit and your application is rejected, what do? And today we'll be talking about disputing errors on a report of that kind. Previously, we had an episode that dealt with collection of past due rent, so I'll refer you back to that episode for a discussion about that, although it does touch on the reporting part just a little bit. But today we'll be really focusing on what that background or tenant screening report is, what's contained in it, where it comes from, and if it's got incorrect information that's causing you problems, what you can do about it. But first, before we get started, I do want to remind you that this webinar is for informational purposes only. It is not legal advice in any way. Watching this webinar doesn't retain us as your lawyer in any way, and we're not providing particular advice, just general information that we hope will be helpful to you. So just keep that in mind. Also, we will post a recording of this video on our YouTube channel after the broadcast. Our producer, Kenneth Elliott, who is in the background as always today, will do that for us pretty quickly. And so you can watch for that, and we will link to some of the previous episodes that touch on the subject. And also we'll have linked down below some sample letters that you can use if you're disputing a credit background screening report. Also, you'll notice on your screen that there is a QR code, and we invite you to click on that, check it out. It will lead you to a link to sign up for our newsletter from Legal Services, which will have all kinds of extra good information that you might like to know about what we're doing and about some of the things that we do here at Legal Services. So I encourage everybody to click on that QR code and sign up for that. And while you're at our YouTube page, be sure and like this video and share it with others if you think it could be of use and help to them. And also subscribe to the channel. You know, our Level Up Law playlist has well over 100 videos on it now, and you can find just about anything you might have an interest in, but we're always coming up with new topics, and we'll be having another topic next week from our migrant unit, and we'll talk about that towards the end of today's broadcast. So let's get started on today's subject. Rental application rejected. What now? Disputing errors on tenant background screening report. Okay, so what is a tenant screening report? Well, the name kind of says it all, but usually when you are applying for rent somewhere, you have to give the landlord, apartment complex, the company, management company, you have to give them permission to get a background check on you to, obviously, why do they do this? They want to make sure you're going to pay your rent. They want to make sure you haven't had problems in the past with paying rent. Maybe they're looking to see if you have any evictions on your record, or just to, see what your background, even your criminal history and that sort of thing is. But the reason we're doing this episode today is to let folks know that quite often there can be mistakes on these tenant screening reports. So you need to be aware of that and do something about it if you get rejected for a rental unit that you're applying for. So what's in a tenant screening report? Well, here's a few things that can be in there, but it's hard to know exactly what all any given company will have in their own report. These are just some general things that we always see there: criminal history, verification of employment, a credit report, some rental history. They can get that from the court system, see if any evictions have been filed against you. And other things just depending on what the particular company provides and maybe what the landlord is asking for. So where does that information that they get come from? So the landlord's going to get this from a third-party company that does the screening reports. And those are what we call CRAs. They are a consumer reporting agency because they collect information about you and provide it to the landlord. That makes them a consumer reporting agency. Just like if you have credit card debts or mortgage, car loan, and things like that, those companies report on your credit report, and they are consumer reporting agencies also. So those are the ones we typically think about, but these companies that report for tenant screening are also a consumer reporting agency. And they get their information from what's called furnishers of information. So a furnisher of information, one example that we have here is a debt collector or even a company that bought a debt. They're furnishing that information to the company, and they might have a rental debt, which is what we talked about in our last episode about the collection of past due rent. So that might be turned over to a debt collector or debt buyer by the landlord. And when that happens, it may or may not be correct information. So it's really important to think about this. And if you get turned down for a rental unit you've applied for, or an application you've applied for a rental unit on, don't just give up. We'll talk more about that in a minute. Here's just a little bit of a laundry list. It certainly is not all encompassing. I don't know if all of these companies are still in business. I believe they are. But these are just some of the tenant screening companies that are out there. And there's a lot of them. And you can see I've highlighted Experian has one. They're one of the big three credit reporting agencies. And TransUnion has one as well. So that's just an idea of how many of these companies are out there. It's not just like TransUnion, Experian, and Equifax. It's all these little companies that make profit doing this. I also wanted to mention that some of these companies do what's called instant tenant screening. So, and that's obviously going to cost more because it's instantaneous or within 24 hours typically. And that's even worse problem for inaccurate reporting when it's being done so fast. A lot more potential for mixing up names and things like that. So it's important to realize that if it's being done that quickly, instantaneously, basically, and you get rejected because of the report, you may want to look at that because it may not be what you think it is. You might say, oh, well, there was that one time I didn't pay my rent and I got evicted, and it might be that, but it could also be something else that's causing a problem. So you always want to follow up. There's different kinds of errors on these reports, similar to your credit report. It can be anything from mixing up your name with someone else's name to having social security numbers that are one digit off, or really just getting bad information or not getting complete information. These are the kinds of things that can happen. And so, typical errors that we see in credit reports, as well as tenant screening reports. And one of the worst things is with the tenant screening is, as I mentioned earlier, one of the things that's included quite often is a criminal background check. And if they've got incorrect information on you that has to do with a criminal history, you definitely want to do something about that. Okay. So let's talk about criminal background checks and having mixed files like I just mentioned. So like another individual with a similar name or a really close social security number or something like that may end up putting criminal history that's incorrect on your report. It can even be someone who put the information into the system, putting that information in there wrong. Sometimes with a criminal record, you've had the record expunged, but somehow it's still on that report. You have the right to get that off of there. So keep all that in mind for sure. Because this is really the most damaging kind is having, a criminal history. We have an example here that, if they say that you're on the sex offender registry, obviously that's a real problem with getting housing. And so that's why it's really important to check. You just never know what the bad information was. So we're going to talk about how to dispute these tenant screening reports because you do, as I've already said, have the right to dispute them. And as we talked about in the past due rent collection episode of Level Up Law, when you file a dispute on these, the company that has provided this report has 30 days to look into it. And if the information is incorrect, to fix it. And if they don't do that in a timely fashion, then you have rights under the Fair Credit Reporting Act. So let's definitely keep that in mind. So that Fair Credit Reporting Act, which I just mentioned, is the main law, it's federal law, that covers how these tenant screening companies operate and how these reports that they sell are supposed to work and how you're to be protected. So again, they're called CRAs, these companies that are providing the reports. And the FCRA says that they have to have, the company has to have policies and procedures that assure the maximum possible accuracy of the reports that they sell. And quite often this is just not the case with tenant screening reporting companies. So you need to be aware of that and know that it's really important to check behind the report. And so because they may not really have the proper procedure to assure that maximum accuracy, and that's what you need if you're going to get that next rental place. So the FCRA, the Fair Credit Reporting Act, is what covers them. So we'll talk about that as we go along. So what you want to do is to actually get that report to begin with. So let's say you've been rejected for a rental unit. And they don't necessarily have to tell you if that was the reason, like the landlord who's gotten this report. But if the adverse action is because of that report, they've always got to give you the name, phone number, etc. of the company. Even though they might not be saying that's the reason, they still have to give you that information if they've got that report. And then you need to request the report within 20 days. Okay? So they give you the method to contact that company to get that report, but it's up to you to do it. They don't have to give it to you. The landlord doesn't have to provide the report to you. You have to do that yourself. So definitely do it. Do it within 20 days. And so not only could there be something about maybe a previous eviction or a previous problem with not paying rent, problem with the landlord or whatever, there can be other things on there, as we've already said. So you need to get that report and make sure that everything that's on there, whether negative or positive, but particularly when it's negative, you got to make sure that that's correct. So how do you dispute the information? All right. you will send a dispute letter to the screening company that you've gotten the information on. So you got to review that report really closely, line by line, and write down, everything that's incorrect. If you see a different social security number, a different name, a different address, any kind of incorrect information, write all that down. Do it all, at the same time when you're disputing the report. Dispute everything that's incorrect. Now, if the information is correct, you can't dispute it. Like if it really happened and the information is correct and you just wish it wasn't on there, that is not something that you can dispute or challenge because it's true. But when it's not true, it's incorrect, then you have the right to challenge it. So what they have to do then when they get your dispute, they've got that 30 days that we talked about, and they have to contact whoever furnished the incorrect information and ask them to reinvestigate it, check it out, see if from their records it's right or wrong. And lots of times these type of furnishers with this type of information, and even the information behind that is quite often just not correct. One of the examples that we see quite often is when there was maybe an eviction was filed, but the eviction was denied, right? And the person had paid up their rent, but then maybe they moved on or whatever. So, but the eviction was not granted. But often on our judicial records here in South Carolina, that case is still on the public index, eviction in your name, that there was an eviction action. Sometimes these companies aren't going to go and actually look at the record and see that maybe the case was dismissed, or maybe it wasn't properly reported, in our court administrative workflow. Sometimes that can happen. But either way, you need to check those kind of things out. That's definitely something that happens a lot. And if the furnisher says, oh, no, that was correct, they got evicted, then you can provide the information that you have that shows that you were not evicted, that the case was dropped or dismissed or whatever the result was. And what that brings up is how important it is when you have something like that happen, whether it's eviction or anything else, you really need to keep that paperwork, okay? Because it may be hard to get the paperwork later on. If your case gets dismissed or it's found that you don't owe any back rent or something like that, you want to have that in writing, because there's not going to be a very detailed record of that the way that evictions work in South Carolina. So you definitely need to always get the paperwork on things like that and keep it. If you just have to even scan it to your computer or just keep hard copies, however you keep records, make sure that you have that, so if you do need to dispute something, you've got it. And you can make it clear to whoever's furnishing that information that they've got incorrect information. And then if they don't correct it, as we'll talk about momentarily, then you have the right to require them to do that through a lawsuit under the Fair Credit Reporting Act. But you have to dispute that debt with them, okay? So let's talk about that real quickly. You might have a case against them because there's incorrect information that they won't fix. You've provided them evidence that their information is correct, and they're still not willing to fix it. So, what do? You need to do something right away. Now, they have 30 days to change it and fix it, okay? But you don't know what that result is going to be, and it may take longer than 30 days. In other words, their report back to you may be, the furnisher says that's correct information, and then you have to go through that whole process of demonstrating that it is in fact incorrect. But you've been rejected for a rental unit, you may need to just go ahead and be pursuing this even faster than just waiting on them to do what they're supposed to do. Because quite often, the CRA, the Tenant Background Screening Company, is just going to say, okay, furnisher, they say this is wrong and here's why. Please reinvestigate and confirm or deny, that this is right. And quite often that company just says, oh, look, 2 minutes, and then they say, yeah, that's right. They don't really do a full investigation always. And so, but the reporting company is going to kind of take their word for it sometimes and not take that off. So you're going to need to do more. Now, if they agree that the information isn't yours, you need to tell them immediately. Send the corrected report to the landlord that you applied with. And that's true even if, that is over and you're going to have you've moved on and trying to, find another unit. That's going to follow you until you get it corrected. And so you never know when you're going to have to be applying for a different rental unit down the road. So you got to do it as soon as you know about it. And one of the reasons for that too, and we'll talk a little bit more, I think, about the Fair Credit Reporting Act, but it does have what we call a statute of limitations. And it's a 2-year statute of limitations under the FCRA. So as soon as you find out about the incorrect information, you dispute it, and they don't fix it, you've got 2 years to challenge that in court under the Fair Credit Reporting Act. Now, and filing a lawsuit under the Fair Credit Reporting Act is one thing. You can also file a complaint with a couple of government agencies that can also be helpful. And that's the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau and the Federal Trade Commission. Both of those oversee this industry that is under the FCRA. And so they, like many others, have a way on their website for you to file a complaint online and see if they can help you get something done about that. Okay, so here's a couple of examples that I wanted to talk about. So let's say you're trying to get into public housing or get a housing voucher, but they deny you because there's a background check that was done and you discover it's incorrect. What can you do? Okay, you are entitled to that grievance process that happens with housing authority. So if that's the case, you've got a really short, narrow window after you get rejected in order to challenge the decision. So once you do that, then you can take all the information that you have and say, hey, you wrongfully denied me the housing voucher because this is incorrect information that you're going on. And here's all my proof that you should have kept of why that's incorrect. And that way, hopefully, you can get that reversed. Okay. Now, how do you know if the denial that you got in your rental application was because of the background check? Well, again, they have to give you the information about where they got the screening report from, okay? And they're required to let you know if there was a negative report and that was part of the reason they rejected you. Remember, they don't have to give you a copy of the report. You got to get that for yourself. But they do have to tell you if that report was used, or even in part, to reject you. So, and I just mentioned here that, there are going to be some landlords who either don't know that or just don't bother to tell you specifically. So always ask if that happens to you. If you're rejected, ask why. Say, did you get a screening report on me? And they might say, well, yeah, we did. Well, was that part of the reason? Well, we don't know. Or no, it wasn't, or whatever. Either way, no matter what they say, you should get that information about that report from them, which they're required to do. required to give you, and then you take it from there to get that stuff corrected if it's in fact incorrect and needs to be fixed. Okay, how do you get a copy of the screening report? I kind of just said that, didn't I? You ask the landlord, who is supposed to give you the specific information about how to contact that particular tenant screening company. And that's what we call an adverse action notice. Okay? They're required to do that. And again, as I said, they don't have to give you the report, but they do have to tell you that part of the reason they took the action they did in rejecting your application was because of the report. And just keep in mind, all landlords now are getting the screening reports. So it's a very few who don't get those. And then the screening company has to send you the report if you've been turned down because of it. So they've got to send it to you once you require it. And so just to mention here, like we said, a lot of them do those instantaneous reports, a kind of that 24-hour report. You may have run into that before. They say, oh, we'll take your application. We'll let you know in 24 hours if it's accepted. Well, that's one of the reasons why, because they want to get that instant credit report. But when you ask for the report, it may be different than what they got because of that instantaneous thing. So you want to keep that in mind as well. Okay. Again, how do you fix it if there's negative information, particularly if it's a crime, eviction, some of those kinds of things, but really anything that's negative. You contact that company directly, you want to see that report, you want to get a copy of it, and then you're going to dispute it. And again, we'll have some sample dispute letters linked in the description below when we post this video to YouTube. But you can also just go straight to the websites for the FTC and the CFPB. Those are ftc.gov and consumerfinance.gov. And you can just type in the search box, sample credit reporting dispute letter. You could probably just even put dispute letter and you'll find it that way. So they will have a really good letter that you can go by, but we'll also post some in the description below. You will have to send them information, that identifies you, and sometimes we're a little squeamish about doing that. But if you're going to have to prove who you are, that's just going to be part of it. And again, they have 30 days to reinvestigate and see if what your information says doesn't match what this furnisher gave them. And they've got those 30 days to do it. And you want to do everything in writing by mail if you can, by certified mail. Sometimes you're going to talk to people over the phone. So if you do it that way, which is not recommended, definitely take notes of who you talk to, what day you talk to them, when you talk to them, and what exactly they said, because that may ultimately be part of a lawsuit if it gets to that. Hopefully it won't, but if it does, you're going to have all that information. And again, and I think we mentioned this before, if they say, okay, yeah, we've looked at this, it turns out this is not information that is truly about you. So, we acknowledge that, and you say, okay, I want you to correct that report and send it to this landlord that I've applied with, and also obviously to yourself, and get that report corrected. And again, even if it's too late to get that particular rental, you're going to need to have this done in the future anyway. So that's sort of what you need to go through to dispute that credit report. And if you have any trouble with that, we certainly here at Legal Services do handle those kind of cases. Hopefully you won't need us, but if you have some issues with that, you certainly can apply for our services. All the information is right here on your screen. We have telephone intake service where our great intake specialists who do a wonderful job for us, they're always standing by on Monday through Thursday, 9 to 6. And they do administrative work on Fridays, so that's why they're just there Monday through Thursday on the phones. But it's 9 to 6, so hopefully you can get through. They get a lot of calls, so you have to be patient. But also, if you're not able to call from 9 to 6, we're always excited to let you know that you can apply online for our services. And our services are free if you're eligible. You have to be eligible in certain ways, whether it be by income or a particular grant. Certainly right now, there's a lot of funding for helping with eviction-related matters. And so we hope that you would call if you had an issue and see if we can help you out with that. I will say that on the online intake, typically, you put all your information in, but they do have to call you back and answer some questions. So make sure that you are looking for that callback and understand that that's going to happen before your application is considered as to whether or not there's something we can do to help you. Now, also, we have a lot of resources, not just on our YouTube channel with videos like this, but on our other websites. We have a calendar at fclegal.org of all the outreach clinics that we do on different topics, and there's probably one coming up in your area, hopefully on a topic that you need. We do divorce clinics in a lot of areas, so that's a real popular one. We also have our lawhelp.org website where we have a lot of good resources of all the different areas of law that we practice in. And we're also on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, so watch for us there. We're always putting out little good bits of information that you might find helpful in this and in other topics. And then finally, I just want to mention again, you can see the QR code on your screen, so just pick that phone, scan it, and go straight to the link where you can sign up for our newsletter and start getting that. We want to get as much information out to people as we can. The social media and the websites is one way that we do that. But another great way that we do that is through that newsletter. And so that's really exciting for us to be really increasing the list of people who want that newsletter through their email. It's up to you, but I think you'll find it really, really helpful. So that's it for today. Let's look and see if we have any questions before we go that I may be able to answer. I cannot answer specific questions about a specific legal matter, but sometimes we can do it with just general information that might answer your question. Let's see here. All right. Like we do not have any questions right now. So, but if you do have questions or you need help on this subject or a related subject or something that is a type of law that we practice, which you can go to our website and see the list of that, then definitely check it out and see if we are able to accept your case. We can't accept every case. We're not like the public defender's office who has to pretty much represent everybody that qualifies and is eligible for those services. For us, we have to be careful about how many cases we take because we only have so many lawyers that can handle the cases. So unfortunately, we can't take every case, but we do try to help out as much as we can, even if we can't represent you in court. So just keep that in mind. So that's it for today. I do want to remind everyone that next week on Level Up Law, our migrant unit will be talking about how they cultivate access to justice for the migrant farm workers here in our state. I encourage you to sign up for that. It is, right now, Hispanic Heritage Month, September 15th through October 15th. And so we're doing as much as we can to promote that area of our practice and the ways in which we can help the Hispanic community. And particularly, we want to highlight our migrant unit that just does a terrific job out of our Charleston office. So definitely sign up for that. You can go to the calendar on our website. Follow us on social media. It's always posted there. And subscribe to all those channels and follow us. And you'll see all the new episodes advertised there when they're coming up. So we look forward to having you next week. And I want to thank everybody for joining us this week. I hope this information was helpful to you.
Hey,
And
Susie,
we'll see you next week.
Hey, Susie, we did have one question from the audience, and
All
it
right.
was in regards to what if the company has changed, I guess, their name or their business since the eviction.
Meaning the landlord, I guess, or the.
I'll wait for them to reply, but I think that might be what they mean.
I did not see that on there.
They're referring to the rental properties.
Okay, so the rental property is now owned by a different landlord, is basically what it sounds like. And I think that's a really, really good question. And I think the answer to that is not real clear, but what I would say is that it's whoever is reporting the information. Okay, so if this is a previous rental that now has a new landlord, but the incorrect information is being reported on you having lived in one of those units, then you need to find out, and the only way to do is get a copy of that report and make that dispute and show all the information that you have about why it's incorrect. And then if there's not a legitimate landlord there who has that information about you, then they can't really confirm the information. Now, if they confirm the information and they're stepping into the shoes of that previous owner or that previous landlord, then that makes them responsible for their own actions. So if they have those records from the previous landlord and they're looking at those records and giving incorrect information, they have to do due diligence to make sure that the information that they're providing is correct. And if they have any reason to know that it is or might be false, they're not supposed to report it. I mean, that's a violation of the FCRA. So that's kind of how I would answer that. I hope that's helpful just as general information. But it's all about what's on the screening report and who's reporting it and where they got their information from. So if you look at it, you see that it's incorrect, you dispute it, you provide all the information that you have, all the evidence that you have that shows it's incorrect, and then you just have to get that report back from the screening company and to see what that result is. And if the result is that they don't change it or they say that that information is correct and you know you've got the evidence that shows that it's incorrect, then you take that next step of your rights under the FCRA, because you've done the dispute. That's got to be done first. And then you can potentially file a lawsuit under the FCRA. Probably going to need a lawyer for that. Tough to do.
One more follow-up question on that as well is, how long does eviction stay on the public record, on public index?
Yeah, you know what? It's on the public index forever. It doesn't get taken off. It doesn't really have like a judgment is good for 10 years on the public record. An eviction is going, at least in South Carolina, will always be on there. So that's why it's really important to set the record straight or get the record straight to begin with. Anything else? I don't know why I can't seem to see the questions, but I'm glad you can see them, Ken. I hope that's helpful information. Any others?
think that is it.
Okay, well, thanks again for joining us. I appreciate the good questions. Feel free to go and watch the video once Kenneth posts it to our YouTube channel. Don't forget to like and subscribe while you're there, and get those notifications, so that ring that bell. But yeah, go there and we'll have some of the materials posted with this video, and you can feel free to put a question or comment there, and we'll let you know if there's any other information we can post there. So thanks again, everybody. We really appreciate you tuning in on Tuesdays at noon. We'll see you next week for the South Carolina Legal Services Migrant Unit. Take care.